war in Gaza is over. Humanitarian aid is now pouring in, including hundreds of truckloads of food, medical equipment, and other supplies, much of it paid for by people in this room. Civilians are returning to their homes. The hostages are reuniting. I mean, it's beautiful. I'm just watching it backstage. The level of love and sorrow, I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing when you see they haven't seen their mother, their father. They haven't seen them in such a long time, and they lived in a tunnel, a very little tunnel, very deep. And the level of love is just incredible. It's a beautiful thing to see. It's, in one sense, it's so horrible that it could have taken place, but in another sense, it's so beautiful to see a new and beautiful day is rising, and now the rebuilding begins.
The rebuilding begins. That's President Trump declaring the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas over. Is it? I don't know if you saw it, but there was video of Hamas carrying out basically brutal. They lined up. I believe it was about 20 people who they said were helping Israel, and they just opened fire on them. It's a very graphic video. Joining me to discuss this, I'm telling you, because I'm going to need somebody to help me break this down, because the more I watch, the more I see, it just breaks my heart. But you know, when you think about what you see over there, that's one of the reasons why William Thibeau, he's a former Army Ranger and the director of the American Military Project at the Center for the American Way of Life. His mission is not to modernize the military, but to return it to the warrior ethos that once made the American soldier the MD of the world. William, welcome to Detroit's Morning Answer.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Now, you heard President Trump say the war in Gaza is over, and then you see that Hamas, first of all, are not willing to turn over their arms just yet. They brutally just assassinated over 20 people that they said that were helping Israel. I guess probably they were recruiting people to help Israel. What do you say about that? Is this war over? Is peace in the Middle East something that will happen in our generation?
What we know is that President Trump is giving us the best chance for peace if all parties involved follow the plan and trust the plan. The first phase of the deal was about Israel withdrawing troops to a certain line and Hamas returning remaining hostages, which seems to have taken place. You know, all is going well right now. Obviously, what needs to follow is the demilitarization, the surrender of the Hamas threat to Israel. But I don't think we should be so quick to get back into a conflict, because the war itself was unsustainable. It was a slog. It wasn't going that well for Israel. And I think a peace is a much more sustainable solution that President Trump is ushering into reality.
You know, William, I'm not trying to make this a partisan issue, but when you hear former President Joe Biden and Antony Blinken chime in and saying that they deserve some credit for this peace deal happening, what say you, William Thibeau, as it relates to the former administration, who, in my opinion, I just didn't see them moving the ball or the needle at all?
You're so right, John. You know, we heard for decades the panacea of liberal internationalism as the best path to peace. You know, we were told that President Obama would usher in peace in the Middle East because he understood the nature of the oppressed. He understood the supposed moral arc of the universe. That was erroneous.
Yeah.
Obama, Clinton, Biden did nothing but guarantee the continuation of conflict because they were not willing to bring both parties to the table to demand peace. That's what President Trump did. He's a powerful leader, not an autocrat, but a leader of the most powerful country in the world, and he used that power for peace. We should start asking the right question as to why Obama and Biden weren't willing to do the same.
Exactly. And now, I kind of want to pivot to what I know your strength is as it relates to the American military. You have said that the American military has suffered a philosophical drift. As this new peace deal and the ceasefires and peace deals around the world are shaping up. What are you most concerned about regarding the moral and structural readiness of our own forces?
Well, it's just that our forces need to be ready, but they need to understand who they are. Not in the sense, of any, sort of identity politics. But the military must understand that it is an institution set apart and unique from the rest of civil society. And rightfully so. It's good that our civil society is not militarized, but we cannot think that the military is an institution that must imbibe all of the politics and ideologies of our civilian life. And, the military might not be a place where a woman can have whatever job she wants. It might not be a place of absolute, racial equality. It certainly shouldn't be a place of discrimination, but it cannot be a place where we try and experiment with the levers of supposed justice and injustice in order to manipulate the outcomes. The military must be focused on operational lethality and the professional ethos that Secretary Hegseth is trying to resurrect in the force. That requires, though, a proper understanding of what the military is as an institution.
So basically, you're saying all the woke crap needs to go. We should not be trying to see how woke we can make our military. That's basically what you're saying in the bottom line, correct?
Yeah, the military shouldn't necessarily look like civil society. The military should look like a fighting force meant to inflict violence on the enemies of America. That's going to be very different than a corporate boardroom or a university.
Yeah, I want to get your take on Pete Hegseth. He's talking about a lot of people were up in arms. He called all of the generals and everybody to Quantico to give a speech, and he said this.
With physical fitness and appearance. If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And as the chairman said, yes, there is no PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the joint force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year, every year of service. Also today, at my direction, every warrior across our joint force is required to do PT every duty day. Should be common sense. I mean, most units do that already.
Now, William, you've long criticized what you call the softening of the military. Is this the beginning of the restoration you've been calling for many years?
I think so. It is almost striking that a notion as simple as physical fitness and haircuts is such an important part of the Secretary of War's agenda to return the military to lethality. But that demonstrates just how far the military fell away from effectiveness and a culture of warfighting. And it is not a merely political kind of trivial issue. These are core issues to the life and training of the military. And if you ask, John, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines throughout the Department of War, they love this. They have been waiting years for this kind of messaging. And you might hear some chattering from the political class about how appropriate it is. But from top to down, folks in uniform are desperate for this kind of change. And again, we've been waiting for it. And it's taken the Trump-Hegseth Pentagon to actually deliver for us.
And, so many people said that Hegseth would not rise to the occasion. When you look at how they rebranded to what the Department of Defense to what it once was called, the Department of War, psychologically, how does that affect the troops, knowing that they're no longer just about defense, they're about going on the attack? And one thing I do know, I have lots of friends. I almost joined the Navy. but my grandfather, who was in the Navy, wouldn't allow me to when I was younger. But psychologically, what does that say to the troops that we are now known as the Department of War? That sounds so. I mean, I got goosebumps just saying that term.
Well, it's the clarity of messaging that war is the job. Even if you will defend the nation, even if we will, to use an improper analogy, play defense, it requires you to wage war in the defense of the nation. That is the proximate primary job of the United States military. It is not foreign policy. It's not peacekeeping. It's not counterinsurgency. It is the conduct of war. And that clarity of message coming from the branding, if you will, of the department, I think is essential to then orient the American people and the American government to a proper use of the military. We shouldn't use it in far-flung, nation-building efforts. It should be used for waging violence on behalf of the nation. And so it's only when necessary, but when it happens, it has to be, devastating and effective so it ends soon.
No. If you're just joining the show, we're talking to William Thibeau, former Army Ranger and director of the American Military Project at the Center for the American Way of Life. Now, I had no idea that the press had carte blanche access pretty much anywhere. And Pete Hegseth, if you hear, I want to play this audio. He was sitting in the White House with the president, and the press had this question for President Trump, but he turned it to Pete Hegseth. I'd love to get your take on this.
Do you consider removing new restrictions on the press that report at the Pentagon, and have you spoken to Secretary Hegseth about this?
I have, yeah. Well, he's finding, I think I can speak for him. I'll let him speak for himself, but I think he finds the press to be very disruptive in terms of world peace and maybe security for our nation. Press is very dishonest. Not you, but the press is very dishonest. You have something to say?
Well, I very much appreciate the question because it was interesting to watch. We had a chance to go along on the historic trip of Middle East peace, which our generation of veterans never dreamed would be possible. So you'd think that the Pentagon press corps of all press corps would be front and center across the board on wanting to give credit to the president for forging this kind of peace, and instead what they want to talk about is a policy about them, which simply says maybe the policy should look like the White House or other military installations where you have to wear a badge that identifies that you're press, or you can't just roam anywhere you want. It used to be, Mr. President, the press could go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the Pentagon, the most classified area in the world. Or also that if they sign on to the credentialing, they're not going to try to get soldiers to break the law by giving them classified information. So it's common sense stuff, Mr. President. We're trying to make sure national security is respected, and we're proud of the policy.
Now, William, I think about a lot of the leaks that have come from the Pentagon, and when you hear that these press are not credentialed, they don't have to sign any agreements limiting their access and prior approvals. Some people are now saying that they call it necessary for national security. Other people are calling it censorship. Where do you stand?
I think those claims are ridiculous, first of all. This is a reasonable policy to establish some common sense for press access to the Pentagon. It's not saying that journalists cannot be in the Pentagon. It says that they must be properly credentialed and accompanied, which is true for any other visitor at that building. And, I think it clearly got out of hand where there was this collusion between, certain, let's frankly call it regime defense officials and members of the press who had an agenda. And, Secretary Hegseth was right. Journalists could walk wherever they wanted in the Pentagon, which was not even true of U.S. soldiers. If you're a U.S. soldier and you don't work at the Pentagon, you can't walk in the Pentagon.
What?
You have to get special access and a special badge. But that wasn't true for the press. Secretary Hegseth is just restoring some common sense.
I mean, I think when you look across the entire this Trump 2.0 administration, they're restoring common sense in a lot of different areas, and I also think they're bringing back what America dominance means. How important when you think about how our adversaries, they watch every negotiation, and they're always looking for signs of hesitation. How do you think China, Russia, or Iran have interpreted what President Trump did in the Middle East and other different ceasefires and peace agreements that he made. How are they looking at this?
They understand that he's going to do what he says. And there's immense power in having that clarity from the most powerful nation in the world. Covert action that was, I think, toxic and engendered a lot of mistrust. Right now, we're bringing clarity of purpose to the American way of life and to American power throughout the world. And I think that's actually going to generate more lasting peace because so much less will happen behind the scenes, away from the public and from the clarity of the negotiations between world powers. They know that when America says something, it's going to follow through, lest you regret not taking us seriously.
William, this last question, I don't mean this offensively, but as I'm a former police officer, and I saw it in our police departments and the training. When you look at the institutions of the military, are we producing warriors or managers? And has leadership become more about compliance than courage?
I think there's definitely a risk of that, and that's what you saw in the previous regime. But things are changing. I am very confident in the current leadership in the Pentagon. It's an exceptional group of people. And again, I think the military is on board. It's a breath of fresh air. They can focus on warfighting in their job once again. And it's really powerful to have that clarity of purpose for the entire force. And it's so important that it comes from the top.
And it's showing in the reenlistment numbers, correct? And the people who are now so willingly wanting to join our military. It shows that just how refreshing the leadership is that they have now, correct?
Yeah, precisely. I think the Marine Corps has already met next year's recruiting goals.
Wow.
For the fiscal year 2026. You can't deny it's working.
Wow. Former Army Ranger and director of the American Military Project at the Center for the American Way of Life, William Thibeau, thank you so much for joining me. It was such a refreshing to know that the men and women who I cherish, I really do. I think when you look at everything that's happening, I think as it relates to the budgeting, we need to find a way that the military never is involved in a shutdown, that their pay and everything has to be dealt with. Just really quickly, what are your thoughts about making sure the military does not get involved or trapped in these political games of passing budgets and things of that nature? Shouldn't we do something to ensure that our military is always taken care of, even after they served as well?
I think so, but I do think the shutdown can show how there's a lot of waste that can be trimmed. And even in the military, we can afford to go without in many areas. And so moving forward, I'm with you. Let's define what's essential, and let's make sure that's never subject to politics. But otherwise, let's not be afraid to really look for the spots in the Pentagon that we don't need and that we can live without, so we can save some money for the things that we do need.
Well spoken. William Thibeau, thanks so much for joining us on Detroit's Morning Answer.
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll be right back.